This video is sponsored by Only Crits. It's the end of another month, so it's time for another Q&A, where I answer the questions submitted by my patrons. This is my way of making up for the fact that I'm not able to do any live streams right now, so patrons can submit questions that I'll answer in these videos. And today, I'm also going to put up a new post on the Patreon soliciting more questions. Also, did I maybe forget to put a post on the YouTube memberships page for November? I think that might have been what happened, but there is going to be a post up there tomorrow for members to submit questions just like my patrons can. Alright, without any further ado, let's get on with the questions. The Forever Dungeon Master asks, "Hey Mike, I'm curious what made you want to make YouTube videos in the first place? Was it a rush of inspiration to convey and explain your thoughts and ideas, or something else? Thank you so much for asking, I appreciate it. I spent a lot of time making TikToks in 2021, making a lot of D&D content. However, at some point, I came up with the insights about Victor and why he worked so well as an NPC, which I talked about in an episode of Critical Role Demystified that you can watch up here, if you want to refresh your memory. And specifically, that was something that I hadn't seen anybody talking about. No one had talked about what made Victor fun or interesting or exciting besides just his voice. So I thought people might be really interested in hearing about that. But before I actually filmed it as a TikTok, it occurred to me that I could make more videos about the other episodes of Critical Role and share other advice. And pretty quickly I realized TikTok was not going to work. That format would mean the discussions around each episode would be broken up into a bunch of videos, and people might only see one part rather than the whole thing. And I also just didn't love using TikTok. Like, the act of editing within the app is frustrating to me, considering how much easier it is for me to just edit the videos on my laptop with my nice fancy editing software. So I started fleshing out the plan for what became Critical Role Demystified and for my YouTube channel overall. I had a lot of experience making YouTube videos and podcasts, and I was excited for a project that could basically bring together all of my interests and all of my skill sets into one place. And yeah, we more or less got there. There's a few more insights and interests that made it into my video essay channel, the Super Geek Academy, which has a new video out, probably not today, today or tomorrow. Go check that out if it's out, and if it is, it's up there, and if not, it will be soon. And there's also a few other skills of mine that I haven't gotten a chance to show off yet, but that will probably make an appearance at some point in future videos. But otherwise, it really feels like everything I've been working on for my entire life, throughout my professional career, my side hustles and my hobbies, has all culminated in this channel. And I'm just so grateful and so lucky that y'all have come along and discovered this channel and made it such a rewarding experience. Also, just as a side note here, I actually very deliberately held off on recording my first video until after my wedding because I wanted to wear my wedding ring in my videos. Thanks so much for asking, I really appreciate it. Next question. BKBW asks, do you have any advice on playing with a DM or player who has an extremely literal/raw only approach to the game? I think it depends on what the issue is, because I don't think there's anything wrong with your GM holding everybody to play according to raw, as long as everyone is on the same page about it. I do think it's valuable to talk about that in the first session, but as long as you know your GM prefers things according to raw, then I think that can still be a fun game. There's nothing wrong with playing strictly according to raw, and in fact, I'm sure the GM in question would argue that it makes the game more fun, because having limitations forces more creativity, and also levels the playing field. This is something I'm going to talk about a little bit in next Thursday's video, the next Critical Role video, but one thing that comes up a lot throughout Campaign 1 of Critical Role is that the players wanted to play with more fuzzy rules and more loose interpretations, especially around spells. But Matt was moving toward a more strict, raw-focused approach, aside from a few explicit house rules. And as Megaphone Man has discussed on his channel when reacting to Critical Role for the first time, part of the problem is that Matt isn't really consistent about it. He'll hand-wave things or make rulings that could have unexpected consequences or just teach the players the wrong lesson going forward. And so then we, as the audience, watched as he essentially straddled that line throughout Campaign 1, as he settled into a new playstyle he was more comfortable with and made more sense in the new format. But playing raw doesn't have to be that way at all. When I sat in for a few sessions of my friend's campaign, at one point I moved my miniature across the battle map, and she said, "Oh, I actually don't use diagonal movement in my games." She didn't feel like diagonal movement made sense. Because it doesn't, it's a contrivance that makes the game easier to play, but if you prioritize realism and strategy on the tabletop, then yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense that diagonal movement would exist, so she doesn't use diagonal movement. And sure, it's not strict raw, it's not really how the rules are written, but I would argue it's still a boundary imposed in the same way you might get if you ran strictly according to raw. But it wasn't a problem. It didn't make the game less fun. I just said, oh, okay, and I recounted the squares to make sure I had enough movement. Because to her, the challenge behind D&D is, with these boundaries in place, can you overcome them to still win the day? And I think that's a very common mindset for strictly raw GMs. So I don't think this is an issue. Just make sure your GM knows that if you get something wrong, it's not because you're fudging or cheating, it might just be because you can't keep the rules straight. So if the GM corrects you, you don't have to take it personally, and the GM doesn't have to take it personally and assume that you're trying to cheat. Because rules arguments don't have to be contentious, they can just be helpful reminders. Now, you might need to adjust to the fact that a raw GM will probably not fudge things or handwave things to work in your favor, so if something doesn't go your way, that's it. You could wind up losing a character because of the dice or your choices. But as long as you can trust that your GM isn't punishing you and is just ruling fairly based on what they think would happen in the game, then as long as that style works for you, it should be no problem. And if that's not your preferred style, that's fine too. It might just mean that you're looking for another gaming group or another game system. And if you can't trust that they are playing fair, if you think they're always sending monsters after you for some reason, you don't think they're making fair or just rulings, then, well, to be honest, that feeling has nothing to do with whether or not they play according to Raw. It might feel like it's because they're a more harsh GM, but really, lack of trust is a completely separate issue. Now, you also asked if I had advice for playing with a player who has a literal/raw-only approach to the game, and I actually think having a very raw-focused player can be a bigger issue. Again, the problem isn't playing according to Raw, it's still a separate issue, but I can speak to this one from experience because I've been that player before. I've talked about that in this video, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with a player who only plays according to Raw, as long as they're only holding themselves to that standard. Where it becomes a problem, and this is something I was really guilty of, but it becomes a problem when you start calling your fellow players out for breaking the rules. Or, to be more accurate, calling them out for forgetting the rules. Because unless your GM specifically turns to you and says, I want you to enforce the rules for me, then I'm personally of the opinion that you should keep those observations to yourself. Though to be fair, that depends on how they got the rule wrong. If somebody rolls the wrong die, sure, go ahead and help them. If somebody thinks their spell or their attack does less damage, or they forget to add their modifiers, then sure, lean over and help them. But if somebody rolls with advantage when they shouldn't have had it, look, you're not the GM. If you think the player is deliberately cheating, talk to the GM away from the table and not during a game. But if you think they just got a rule wrong, then who cares? It's not your job to police the other players. That's the simple rule of thumb. Help out your fellow players when you can, as long as you can do so without telling them how to play their characters. But don't police them on the GM's behalf. That's not why the GM invited you to the table. Now, if you're not the player in question and you have another player who's being disruptive by calling out the ways the GM or the other players are breaking the rules, then once again, talk to the other players outside of the game. Ask the other players about it. If the GM and the other players say, yeah, it's helpful, I like that he's keeping us honest, then okay, fair enough. At that point, you need to decide if you can tolerate somebody calling all of you out for getting the rules wrong, or if you feel that dynamic is not right for you. But if the others aren't wild about it either, then the GM should really talk to that player and lay down some ground rules to remind the player that it's not their job to hold everybody to the rules. Again, maybe the GM likes that they have a player who handles that, but maybe it is bothering other people, and you won't know until you check. However, I will say, as a piece of advice, try to be respectful about this. You are essentially going behind another player's back, so don't say anything you wouldn't want them to hear about. Keep in mind that it's ultimately the GM's call, although ideally the GM will keep all the other players' feelings in mind. And once again, remember that just playing by the rules and hoping others do the same is not, in and of itself, a toxic trait. It's really more like something that can lead to toxic behavior if the player starts basically backseat GMing, because that's really the problem we're talking about. I hope that answers your question. I know this can be a complicated topic, so let me know if you have any more questions about that, that speaks to any particular ways someone's raw-focused attitude might be creating some friction at the table. Before we get to the next question, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Only Crits Dice. Only Crits is a fantastic company that's been a sponsor of mine for a long time, and they have some incredible Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals for you. If you visit their shop starting today, November 29th, and ending Monday, December 2nd, you can take advantage of their buy one, get one deal. If you buy 2 dice sets, you'll get a third for free, and you'll get a free Only Crits dice tray. They also have a new 5e adventure available every day for free from Friday through Monday. So make sure to visit the website every day this weekend to download a new adventure. And if you want to order a mystery box of dice, you can apply the promo code MYSTERYBOX35 for the rest of the weekend to get 35% off of your mystery box before the end of Monday. Make sure to visit my link in the description to let Only Crits know that I sent you their way. Whether you're buying the gift of dice for your GM, or your fellow players, or someone you think might want to play the game, or just for yourself because you're worth it, now's the perfect time to pick up some gorgeous dice from Only Crits. Thank you so much to Only Crits for sponsoring this video. Next question. Doombot9 asks, what, if any, features would you like to see return from older editions of D&D? For example, I would like to see the ability to level up your skills individually in a way similar to 3.5. Honestly, the only older edition I'm super familiar with is 4th edition. Everything else I'm either only passingly familiar with, or I basically only know anything about it from reputation. And I've gone back and checked out older editions for some of my videos, and I've got ideas and plans to do some more of that in the future, but if we're stealing mechanics, I can really only speak to 4th edition. So if we're looking at 4th edition, I really like the way critical hits worked. When you rolled a crit, then you didn't have to roll damage, you just automatically dealt the max damage you could have rolled on your dice. And when you happen to roll max damage without rolling a natural 20, we called that critting the hard way. And you couldn't exactly just take that and transfer it to 5e, because it would make crits less powerful, but I do think 4E crits felt a lot better, because when rolling damage for a 5E crit, you roll all of your damage dice twice. But you could still wind up rolling really low, and then that critical hit doesn't feel that impactful. It feels so much better to do max damage on your normal dice, rather than to roll twice as many dice and still roll below your typical average, so you might as well not even roll the crit. This is why, in some of my recent 5e games, I've told players that when they get a crit, they should assume they got max damage on their normal dice, and then just roll all their dice and add it to that max result. That way they're still conceivably getting the results they could have gotten with a 5e crit, but they're also always feeling like they're doing bonus damage, so it feels closer to a 4th edition crit, and in fact it's a little bit better than that. So that's the closest way I would answer, I think. 4th edition is a really funny edition to steal from because it just works so much differently from how 5th edition works, and honestly from how all the other editions worked. So you can't just steal things one for one and transmit them into 5e. MCDM has definitely stolen a thing or two from 4th edition, very obviously and openly, and they've polished them up and presented them for 5th edition, but they usually have to be adapted quite a lot. As an example, we can check out 4th edition's minions. In 4e, minions are just bad guys that had 1 hit point only. But 5e works differently, so that approach wouldn't work the same way. So at MCDM, they had to come up with their own approach to minions that wouldn't break when applied to 5th edition. So that's why my approach to stealing the 4th edition crit damage is technically its own approach, but I do think it's heavily inspired by the way critical hits worked in 4th edition. At least, that's the reason I like that approach. Thank you so much for asking, I really appreciate it. And here is our final question. Manuel Torres asks, this is related to your class levels for Bad Dudes video. How would you go to create some important NPC that might help the party at some point? Would you make a character sheet for them? If I'm treating myself the way I wish I would and not making extra work for myself, then no. I don't think I would make a character sheet for them. As I discussed in that video, I think character sheets are a distraction and give you a bunch of extra information you just don't need when running a character. I generally prefer to use something more along the lines of the NPC stat blocks in the monster manual. That said, even when running a pre-published adventure, and this is at least particularly true about Curse of Strahd, I still feel like the companion stat blocks need a lot of work. Now, to be fair, they have the complicated aspect of having spells listed on the character sheet, which is not how most NPC stat blocks are done anymore. But for some of those characters, I don't necessarily think spellcasting is that interesting for them to have. I think those spells distract from what makes those characters cool to me. Like, I don't think monster hunters need to be clerics or bards. That just doesn't make a lot of sense for how I run that game. But also, some of those companions are just like stupid high level. They're probably designed that way so you can bring them into battle with Strahd, and it's really my fault that the party keeps recruiting these NPCs for other missions and they hang around for extended chunks of the campaign, and that's something I've talked about before as something I need to work on for future games. But also, I might want to swap them out for stat blocks that level up along with the party. I really do need to look into the sidekick rules or MCDM's retainer rules. I haven't really explored either of those too deeply because I usually just forget about those options, but one of these days I really need to see if I can replace the NPC ally stat blocks from Curse of Strahd with something that's both easier to use and also not so high level that they currently overwhelm the other party members. So that's where I am right now. Maybe when I take that for a spin, maybe when I actually create some NPCs more from scratch, especially in the new edition, I'll talk about that on the channel, but right now I haven't done a lot of that. I should use NPC stat blocks, and I should try to make sure that they are not as powerful as I sometimes find that they are. And that's it. That's the last question we got this month. If you want to submit another question for me to discuss in a future video, then make sure to join my Patreon or become a YouTube member at the $3 a month tier, and look for that post to go up tomorrow. And you know what? You can also shoot me a question on Ko-fi. Just drop me a couple bucks and message me a question. And speaking of things happening tomorrow, keep an eye out for another video right here on this channel about the Greyhawk campaign setting. And if you want to make sure you catch my videos whenever they come out, make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell. That all helps the channel a lot because it helps you know when I've got bonus videos coming out, and it helps me because when you watch those videos as soon as they come out, that helps the channel. It boosts my numbers and brings my channel to more people. Join my Discord server to hang out with other awesome people and sign up for my newsletter, and click here for a video I put out earlier this week about the art in the new player's handbook and how incredible it is. I would really appreciate you checking that video out. Until next time, play fair and have fun.